I'm delighted once again to be joined by Anna Danylchuk, who has been creating a war diary since the early days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Anna Danylchuk aims to tell the truth about Ukraine and Russia's war and cut through the noise and propaganda. And of course, in the last few weeks, unfortunately, we have seen a significant uptick again of propaganda from Russia's useful idiots, agents, and assets. Before we jump in, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports Anna and her work through Buy Me a Coffee and various platforms like that, and also to those who are supporting Silicon Curtain as well in similar ways. Also wanted to give a nudge to the audience as well. Our film project is approaching the full funding we need to get the teaser made. We are absolutely committed to filming this in Ukraine this year. We think it's an incredibly important part of the information warfare that we get this done and then can take the film on tour to legislatures and parliaments across Europe, the US, and various other countries. So if you are able to, please do help that. There is a link in the description of the video. Anna, welcome back. It's been ages since we last spoke.
Yes, I have missed you, Jonathan, and all of your beautiful community. Happy to be here with you.
Well, I've missed you. They've missed you too. Hopefully, we can make up for that by having a fantastic episode today. And of course, it has been a difficult, I think, a couple of months for various reasons. Firstly, there was the period in the run up to the election where Russia has clearly increased its efforts to throw troops at the various front lines, but also to fire missiles and drones, etc., at Ukrainian cities. There's been a definite uptick in that. We've also seen exceedingly disturbing videos of the brutality that Russia has inflicted on Ukraine, not only the strikes on civilians and infrastructure, but also the executions of POWs. We'll come to the election and stuff, but I wanted to start off really focusing on how difficult the last couple of months has been for Ukraine and Ukrainians.
Thank you, Jonathan. Of course, these months were difficult, and not only continuous Russian crimes contribute to that, but also general anxiety in the world. And the fact that this war lasted for almost, full-scale war for almost 3 years, and more than 10 years of Russian war against Ukraine in general. And there are ups and downs. And as a Ukrainian, I've already learned that war, perhaps same as politics, is very dynamic and also very unpredictable. We definitely see that Russia goes all in. They continuously escalate, and weak reaction of our allies is something that encourages them to break more laws and agreements and invite, for example, tens and thousands of North Korean troops. You know, when we first realized this is happening, I've read lots of Ukrainians joking on Facebook. Could you imagine like Ukrainian soldiers fighting North Korean troops in Russia just a year ago? It seemed like a doomsday scenario, but now somehow people too quickly accept this new abnormal reality and go on as if nothing specific happened. Recently, one article, if I'm not mistaken, in New York Times literally made me furious, even though, I'm quite reserved. They were claiming that it may be very difficult for Ukraine to control territories in Kursk region because Ukraine lacks people. And that is all in the context of like 15,000 of North Korean troops already on the ground. And there are no discussions of something similar happening in Ukraine. I realize that no country would send their soldiers to the trenches, but they could do a lot of things in logistics on the border. Let's say in my region that is considered semi-safe borders, Poland, but unfortunately also Belarus, and thus free more of Ukrainian soldiers to move to the hot zone. And before we actually started recording, we've discussed this phrase that irritates all people who stand strong for freedom and democracy. We are with you as long as it takes. and compare it with a phrase of the North Korean minister who recently visited the Kremlin, where she said, "We are with you until your victory." So I think there are lots of words that we have to forget. And these are concerns, these are escalation, Putin's red lines, Russian elite, by the way, there is no such things. And we should introduce ourselves to more of this decisive vocabulary to defeat Russia, to win this war, to return back justice. Because with all that, we simply fall in the abyss of Russian violence. And I know you were lucky to interview Peter Pomerantsev a couple of times on your channel. This is my ambition for the future. And in his recent article, he beautifully describes that even if the United States choose to be in isolation after Donald Trump's inauguration, they have to understand it is something bigger than international politics, because standing up against bullying in Ukraine is standing up against bullying in the US. Fighting mafia, Russian mafia in Russia and Ukraine, it's fighting mafia everywhere in the world. Because these values, they are universally applicable. And if you allow something bad to happen to your neighbor, you actually let this evil into your soul, into your reality, and it will pay back sometime soon.
Absolutely correct. Well, hopefully we can get Peter back on. Hopefully, maybe we could even do a panel discussion. I think that would be incredibly
Sure,
impactful and powerful.
sure.
Well, let's make that happen. You mentioned the recent election in the US, and this is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because we don't know how this is going to work out. We are starting to get some ideas of who Trump is picking for his team, but he is not that kind of win-win, lose-lose politician. He is a clear zero-sum game, win-lose type politician. Unless he can win, he's not interested. But if he gets a sniff of something that will make him look good, that give him a win, then typically he can be on board for that. Is this something perhaps Ukraine can perhaps utilize, show that it is able to win, such as the Kursk incursion, which surprised the world, such as the extraordinary strikes Ukraine is making against Russian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and its military-industrial complex? If Ukraine shows it can be a winner, is this one way perhaps to get around Trump and get him on side?
I might surprise you, but the majority of people in Ukraine know that whatever happens, we are the winners. And you know why? Because Putin and his attitude to the world, his attitude to power, his attitude to the work of the society, economy, culture, and politics, it is the past. It's not the future. He is in the past. No matter how much he tries to grab our country and other countries and return us back into the past, it's not the way life is on this planet. We can only go forward, and Russia goes backward. They live in the past. And that is why they cannot win. Another thing that, of course, Trump is totally unpredictable, and this can be both good and bad. I know that traditional politics is about predictability, and that's why so many people, smart people around the world, are very concerned, and I share the concerns. But from the other point of view, this management of escalation, this politics of let's not interfere, it does not work in the modern and violent world. And sometimes, like too harsh moves can be a solution. If we go to the extreme edge, some people, some commentators in Ukraine say that actually the election of Trump may be not the end of the Ukraine-Russian war, but the start of the Third World War, with Ukraine being on its periphery with some necessary combat experience. Uh, it was interesting, and it was like teaching to observe how people get very emotional during the elections, and I was trying to teach myself not to repeat these mistakes in future. Because still, even if we know the name of the new US president, this is a very influential person, but still it is just one person that cannot decide everything. And even if it seems like that with his new order or decree he changes everything, he cannot. It is the people that change things. And I want to remind our viewers who may feel too depressed about Ukraine, for example, that before the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, our best friends, our best allies did not give Ukraine more than 72 hours. And the weapons that we received during the first days and weeks were for these partisan wars. They did not believe that we will fight as a state, that our universities will continue working, cafes will continue selling coffees. By the way, buy Jonathan coffee for his good project to come.
Unfortunately, it's British coffee. It's not Ukrainian coffee, but nonetheless, you know.
That's why another reason why we need to liberate Ukraine, so that Brits can come and drink Ukrainian coffee. And many things Ukraine surprised the world. Why? Not because the president of the US said something very decisive, or the president of France, but because Ukrainian people, they do not agree to live under Russia. We will never accept that. So no matter what President Trump, Musk, Macron, Scholtz will tell us, we will not accept Russia. We know our war for 300 years. We know all the fake things that Russia can offer, and we know what are the things that can guarantee peace and security, not just for Ukraine, but for this part of the world. And we are already a subject, not an object of politics. So I know it will take some time for other countries and other governments to accept and get used to this fact. But it is like that. And it may be in future, in the near future, that you will need Ukrainian military and political expertise to stand for your own countries. And of course, we may turn out to be one of your strongest allies. It's not always about just the weapons. It's also about how to apply them, how to build tactics, and how to break Russian borders. And one more thing that I keep reminding on my channel, that when Zelensky won presidential elections in 2019, he got 73% of support. And do you know why? Because one of his main messages to the people of Ukraine was, I know how to end the war. We have to stop shooting, simply to stop shooting, and then I will speak with Putin. And 73% of Ukrainians who knew the history, who knew the situation, believed, because they wanted to believe. And look at Zelensky now. He is the main military opponent, because I don't want to say enemy, of Russia. He may become the reason why Putin's regime will collapse. A person who believed he will speak and everything will end. The similar situation can await Trump, because some people who are too emotional think they are friends with Putin. And I think neither Putin nor Trump have real friends.
This is absolutely fascinating, and I could ask 100 questions at this point. But one of them, I think, and what we try to do on our conversations is dig into the Russian mindset. Because whereas I'd love to just talk about Ukraine, we also find that we do make some progress, I think, in talking about Russian mindset, the trauma, the centuries-long trauma that's actually given rise to it, and how that trauma is then projected, inflicted onto Russia's neighbors, and of course, Russia project and inflict that same trauma back onto their own people, onto each other as well. And here's an interesting thing. Putin seems to believe. Now, the debate, of course, if you're, in that partisan space, you may believe that Putin got Trump elected. That is, however, to deny the agency of millions of American voters, and things are far more complex than that. But Putin may believe that he got Trump elected. He may believe that Trump owes him this, that, and the other. Trump may or may not believe that he owes Putin a debt. We won't know or may never know the full details of this. But what I found absolutely fascinating this week is how Skabieva and the other vile propagandists on Russian TV, immediately the result is announced. They put gratuitous naked photographs of Melania Trump onto their channel, and they were clearly having so much fun, mocking, exercising their insane sense of superiority over her, over him, over the whole of humanity. And this wasn't just, I don't believe this was just some propagandistic tool. They were reveling in this mockery. And the hubris of it was extraordinary. This, in my mind, could actually backfire on them. But I'd love to hear what you think of why they did it and what impact it may have.
You know, I actually have a very contrary opinion of what you expect to hear. And one of the reasons I think not many people can get into Russian mind is because it is totally perverted from yours. Like, there's normalcy bias that led millions of people around the world believe that no full-scale invasion is possible, and so on and so forth. Well, actually, one of the reasons that make me surprised that the United States chose Donald Trump was his attitude towards women. I don't like lots of his comments being a woman. I wouldn't like to hear kind of compliments he expresses, though I know just like I'm too old for him to compliment me. But in this world where a woman is an object and luxury, it may be that they don't think they humiliate Donald Trump by showing naked photos of his beautiful wife, but they actually demonstrate what a beautiful exhibit he has in his collection. And it may be that in their opinion, it's not an offense, but it's just like, look what you've got. Look how good she was or she is. And the case that our understanding of good is very different from the Russian understanding of good, or this mafia style people, can be just another proof that like you cannot negotiate with people who have totally different understanding of the world than you.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of it that way. So it'd be interesting to see in the comments what people think of
Like
that. Yeah.
this locker room talks. In that locker room talks, boys show how good their girls are sometimes. And this may be
And
the
we
case.
know locker room conversation is not something Trump necessarily shies away from. We had the recorded locker room talk that came up in the last election, and it did not
Yeah.
harm him one bit. It
Yeah.
did not
So
stop
it
him.
may be that he actually says, look what I've got. And you?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's a horrible way of thinking, but that's certainly something to ponder.
People who bomb children's hospitals have a terrible way of thinking. Definitely.
This is true. People who ignore that as well also have issues. We'll come to that in a minute. And the amnesiac quality of the Western media, and unfortunately many in the West, who put their heads in the sand. Let's turn to a topic which I think is quite an extraordinary one. And this is probably going to be the thumbnail of the video. And this is the idea of making meat for Russia's next war. Russian propaganda seems to have gone all in on this topic of child free and attacking anybody who says anything even sort of vaguely supportive of that concept, but in a highly traumatized and I would say fairly unpleasant place like Russia. How do you encourage people to make more babies for Russia's future wars?
I'm not sure I'm interested in Russians making more babies for future wars.
But from a propaganda angle, how do you think this is playing out?
think that Russia has serious demographic problems, and that's one of the reasons, like all of the Europe does, and that's one of the reasons why they invade Ukrainian territories. This is not just land resources, but also human resources, unfortunately. And we are in constant danger that they can break, torture people and use them, conscript them and use them against Ukraine or other countries. That's the problem. That is one of the arguments why we should not let Putin take all of the Ukraine, as some are ready to sacrifice us. And another very important clash that exists inside the Russian Federation is the fact that they advertise the idea of Ruski Mir. They advertise the idea of this classical Orthodox church values when their army, their big cities consist of lots of people who actually do not go in accordance with this ideology, who come from depressing regions of the Russian Federation and from the totally different national, ethnic, religious, linguistic background. And they have more and more clashes, these ethnic clashes. Recently, I watched reports from some Russian cities where they confronted Muslim societies for demanding specific clothes to schools, and it contradicts this Russian Orthodox doctrine, but there are some clashes, and Russian authorities do not react. And they do not react because at the moment they are very dependent on Chechen, Dagestani soldiers, and they are kind of paralyzed what to do. And this is what many who like the idea of traditional Russian values do not understand, that in reality, those ideal picture of the Ruski Mir definitely does not coincide with the realities of the Russian Federation that consists of 24 different people's republics. And they have lots of this very raw jokes which demonstrate chauvinistic societies in Russia, like if there are some Russian people in Ukraine and that is why Ukraine belongs to Russia, then Moscow belongs to Tajikistan because there are so many Tajik people in Moscow, and that's the reality. And now they try to use these people, send them to the worst parts of the front lines, conscript them on specific bad conditions, and this is how they try to solve the demographic problems of Mother Russia too. And I think that apart from the Russian economy, which is collapsing, this cultural clashes within the monstrous and totally unnatural environment may result in one of the reasons for the collapse of the Federation and liberation of many new people. And in general, all the things that Russian government, Russian politicians announce, they never follow these rules themselves. And if you look at Putin's private life, we rarely speak about such disgusting things, and we will keep avoiding the topic. But he definitely does not live according to his own Ruski Mir doctrine. We don't know the number of his lovers. We don't know his children. Actually, it's also insane that you literally don't know how many children Putin has. Does he have any with Alina Kabaeva, and so on and so forth? Can you imagine that in the United Kingdom or in the United States, you don't know whether
Unfortunately, we
president...
had Boris Johnson, so
But
yes, we can imagine
you
that.
knew all of his children. I mean, the ones that he knew about, you knew about. We're talking about his behavior. That's one thing. But I'm here talking about this absurd mystery, inability to find out. We're not talking that he's doing that too much. He has too many children with too many lovers. Okay, that's his
And of course, no
personal...
one's going to fall out of windows if they question how many kids Boris has. I mean, he might
Yeah,
not
it's
tell them
just
the truth, but
okay, these are rumors. These are romantic or I don't know, porn series. I'm sorry. But it's not about this fact that you know nothing. You cannot know nothing. It's forbidden. You don't speak. You don't ask these questions. have you seen like can you imagine an interview that like I'm sure that Johnson is asked multiple times back questions about his lovers or children. And we know nothing about Putin and others. And all of their children live actually not next to me, but next to you, Jonathan. They live in your cities, on your streets. So they have this tremendous substitution of what they like reality, of what they speak about and how they live. And imagine how demoralized, how suppressed Russian population is for not even asking questions. Why are you teaching us to live like that, but you're not living like that at all?
Absolutely. And there are many other topics which are taboo, of course. And of course, every Russian quasi-journalist will know what they can and can't ask. That is not a free media environment. That's not democracy. That's not anything that we recognize here. Now, this is going to be quite a difficult topic, I think, because it seems that in the run up to the election, as we mentioned in the introduction, Russia has been hitting Ukraine harder and harder the last month. One of the reasons I think is down to extraordinary cynicism and is a deeply immoral reason as well. And that is, it is rumored that there was some kind of deal between the Biden administration and the Zelensky administration. Whether that's a deal or whether that's something that was imposed on Ukraine, we won't know. But essentially, Ukraine was told to just lay off hitting Russian infrastructure, lay off taking out oil terminals and storage. Just don't do anything unexpected that might sort of gift a news story to the other side. It seems quite likely this is the case. And Russia has used that period to build up its forces and hit Ukraine hard. It also looks like it's using the transition period to do the same thing as well when it perceives that Ukraine is weak and that, you know, Ukraine's allies are even weaker than they were before. But there's another disturbing aspect to this, I think, which is that in that same period, Israel was not asked to moderate its behavior. It was not asked to, stop shooting down Iranian missiles and so on, flying towards its cities. It was not asked to stop the acts, the sabotage acts against the beepers of, let's say, Hamas and Hezbollah's leadership. That same pressure was not applied to Israel, but it was applied to Ukraine. It builds up the idea that the US before and possibly now as well treats Ukraine as a second tier ally, but it still treats Russia as a first tier adversary.
Well, that's real. That's you don't have to know some secret information to be able to draw these conclusions. And we clearly understand that the strategy right now during all these years was not to let Ukraine die, but not to let Ukraine win, because the defeats of Russia can lead to the collapse of Russia, and everybody's afraid of that, as if Russia is not collapsing itself. This is a process that is inevitable. It has already started because the empire is terminally ill. So the only thing that smart politicians can do is actually organize and think how they can control this process to a certain extent. But right now, the world opposes any changes and chooses to believe in parallel reality where we need to preserve Russia. And that is insane, because even if Ukraine returns all of the territories, but Putin remains at power, what will protect us from constant attacks on Ukraine with missiles and other stuff? What? If this evil is not punished, if sanctions are lifted, why? Because he wants to return to G8? No, he will organize his own BRICS 15 or whatever. And people still try to use these mechanisms that totally do not work on dictators. Putin is afraid of Gaddafi's end. Putin is not afraid of not being able to speak in Paris. And another thing is, I am not an expert in US-Israel politics. I often watch a great Ukrainian intellectual, I'm sure you're aware of, Vitaly Portnikov. And he was asked by lots of his subscribers, like, maybe Ukraine should strike without the permission. Like, you have this long-range missile. You have something awful happening because Russia attacked your city. Use this emotional moment and target something large in Russia. And this, and I agree with Mr. Portnikov, is a great mistake, because we can lose everything in just like a second, because the world is only getting used to Ukraine being a strong country, not a part of Russia, not something small and unimportant. The world is still learning. And somehow Israel is a part of the US internal like politics. It's a part of their US life. And Ukraine is not. You can see lots of Israeli politicians speaking, maybe not now, but like, I mean, in general, in US Senate, in Congress, they are a part of the US life. And when US speaks about internal politics, it still keeps Israel in mind, but it does not keep Ukraine in mind. And that is why what they are allowed to do, we are not. And of course, I understand it's not just witnessing what Russia does to Ukraine, not to allow Ukraine to protect, this phrase that I will quote, why some of our allies protect Russian ammunition depots more than they protect Ukrainian schools and hospitals. And actually, one of the reasons to celebrate the US elections, no matter who was elected, is that Jake Sullivan is gone. It was like a national holiday here in Ukraine. And of course, this offends us. Of course, mildly speaking. Of course, this is unjust. But unfortunately, we are not in a position to demonstrate that we are offended. And we simply have to follow stupid political rules when it is the time for just military decisions.
And I've made it my mission to troll Sullivan and Charap and others for the rest of their days to make sure they don't sort of live a carefree life thinking that they've prevented World War III and done a fantastic job.
I'm in your troll farm. I want to be one of your trolls.
I'm already blocked by Charap. He preemptively blocked me some months ago. So it shows you how these people are really not keen to engage in any kind of conversation.
And I wish him a long, long life somewhere in Russia.
That would be an education, I think, for him. He can live next to Snowden and have a jolly
How do you call
time.
it in English? Like where you have heaven, you have hell, and in between, in Dante, what's the English word?
Purgatory. Purgatory.
That would be his purgatory.
Yes, it would. And let's hope there are 14 levels to that purgatory, not just one level to it, I'm sure, He could live in the Kommunalka I lived in. That was 4 levels of purgatory with the other rooms along the corridor. Vitaly Portnikov is of course a fascinating commentator. One thing that he pointed out in a recent video is that what Israel has learned over many decades is how the inner workings of the American political system function. They've built their network of contacts, but they also know how to work those contacts, who to say what to, when to say things, and they know what is the wrong approach and the wrong way to say things, as well as training the world to get used to Ukraine as a superpower. And I believe it will be a technical and military superpower. It seems to me that Ukrainian diplomats need to learn the tricks of the trade from Israel, because there have been some real gaffes in the last couple of months. There's been evidence that some in the Ukrainian diplomatic service need to develop more professionalism and a better understanding of the mechanics, specifically of the US political system. But if they can master that, then there can be some real distinct advantages that will come from it.
I totally agree with you, and I do not deny the fact that there are millions of things that we have to learn here in Ukraine. There are some things where we are great at, like bravery, resilience, like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But there are also lots of things that we have to learn how to do correctly in the diplomatic world, in the world of communication, because I'm sure you've noticed not enough like Ukrainians speaking about Ukraine in the proper way. So there are lots of things to do, but first we have to survive to be able to master that. We were hidden behind the Iron Curtain. We were too relaxed and not serious during the 30 years of the renewed independence. And of course, there are lots of things that we do not do perfectly. And you know, when you were saying about this advanced Israeli diplomacy, I was also thinking about the advanced Israeli missions where they neutralize the enemies of their country in literally every corner of the world. And I hope this will happen to Russian war criminals as Ukrainian intelligence extends. And just today, another enemy neutralized in Sevastopol.
That was a great operation. That was an extraordinary piece there. And of course, I think the world needs to understand that the more territory Ukraine loses, the more likely it becomes that a sort of insurgent army will take the fight to Russia and use these techniques. Because if Ukraine does not get justice through the courts, if Ukraine does not get justice through the international system, and that international system is looking increasingly redundant and frail, when you had the Secretary General of the United Nations visiting Kazan and
Hugging.
essentially bowing down to a convicted war criminal, then that basically means that international justice
Does not
not
work.
only is falling apart, it doesn't work, and it's unlikely that Ukraine will get restitution through those broken institutions. It will have to turn to a slightly more direct form of justice. Of course, I can see the comments now. People go like, what are you saying? What's going on? I mean, we don't want Ukraine to become the bad guy. But some justice does need to happen and be brought to certain individuals.
I can even make us more of a bad guy. You know, I hear from many people that they are afraid, like Russians will be traumatized, they can turn against the world, they may be angry, they may be aggressive. And someone like we have demonstrated this trustworthiness that we are very reliable. We're not like, look, we have a full-scale war. We have so many of injustice against us. We are not allowed to strike the long-range missiles that we have. We don't. Can you imagine what level of reserve and self-control you have to possess not to do it when you realize it's the most right thing to do? How strong you have to be. Everyone, like society, the president, the military, and we follow the rules. And people take it for granted. People think that, like, well, Ukrainians are very reliable. They understand whatever BS we name as escalation management, they accept it. And somehow they are not afraid that at a certain point of time, something can break in our attitude towards the others. And we are not a small country. Like, I know lots are dead because of Russian invasion, but we are still bigger. I hate to say it, but like the majority of the EU countries are like 2 or 3 regions in my country. And then when they keep saying, how come you did not control like that borders or these borders? Guys, I live in a region that is equal to your country, and my region is one of the smallest in Ukraine. It's easy to control my region when it takes like 2 hours to cross it from one side to another. But when it takes you more than a day to travel from one side of Ukraine to another, people literally do not imagine that. And do you want to have Ukraine as a friend or as an enemy? Do you want Ukraine to be a part of Russia? I mean, torn, broken, and used against you with all the skills, knowledge, and offense? Or do you want Ukraine to guard you as we want because we are a part of your values? Please finally accept us. And these people who see so much of betrayal, who are that traumatized, who realize that like nobody cares that much, that many treat you as a second tier, as you've mentioned, even after your heroic, tremendous resilience, and still look up at Putin, who is a war criminal, and treat him better than your president, at a certain moment of time, you can actually get offended and you can start being bad. And I hate it when people say, no, 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 you're talking about nuclear weapons. It's so difficult to maintain them. It's so difficult to... Look, we have signed Budapest Memorandum. We have given up our nuclear weapons because you've guaranteed us the protection. You say that this Budapest Memorandum does not mean anything and you're not going to guarantee us security. So if it is not worth anything, we are free to have nuclear weapons. It is always two-sided like process. It's quite logical. If you do not follow the rules, we will not. And I don't want it to turn out into this like direction.
And I've become something of an advocate for Ukraine, either coming under the nuclear umbrella immediately, and that would be not just NATO, but also the EU and another organization which doesn't get much press, but which is the Joint Expeditionary Force. I think Poland and Ukraine need to be added to that. That could be an alternative to NATO to provide some kind of deterrence to Russia. But if none of these things are forthcoming, Ukraine needs a nuclear deterrent, and it has the capability to acquire that, no doubt.
It's expensive to maintain. Come on. Rumors say Iranians, North Koreans are capable to maintain. So congratulations, we are richer than these two countries.
And we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you a slightly more light-hearted question to end on. And almost immediately after the polls closed in the US, Ukraine resumed its strikes against Russian objects, especially oil refineries, logistics, and so on. And that's spectacular. One thing I didn't sort of quite understand, it seems that several alcohol factories have been hit as well. I was wondering whether that's strategic or whether this is just a way of trolling Dmitry Medvedev.
And why Dmitry Medvedev? Also millions of Russians. I liked it because actually targeting Russian alcoholic factories, alcoholic factories is also okay. Alcohol
Both
factories,
work. Both variants
distilleries,
work. Yes.
targeting Russian distilleries is definitely crossing the red line. That is a huge escalation on the Ukrainian side when you destroy one of the main products for the survival of Russia, because how else do you live there without this turning off your brains? But in reality, these distilleries are part of chemical factories, chemical production, like factories that are working on the production of some either explosives or even oil products, and they need alcohol, like ethanol, for work. And it was just like that. The bigger objects were targeted, and on the territory of that object, they also had this chemical ethanol. So this is not like a vodka plant, but it was a chemical plant that needed for its further production ethanol, and also produced it on the site.
Yes, if you really want to target Russian alcoholics, hit things like the perfume factories where the ethanol is added to perfumes and household goods. Exactly. Anna,
And they really drank that eau de cologne perfumes, and they still drink, I think.
Sheeper, that was the infamous Soviet one, wasn't it?
Just imagine, you want us to negotiate with people who drink perfumes.
Yeah. If no, we don't often get to this subject because we don't tend to talk about imperialist literature. But if anyone really prides themselves on knowing Russian literature, if they want to get through to the Russian soul, forget Dostoevsky, forget Tolstoy and all this stuff. They need to read Moskva Petushki by Venedikt Yerofeev to understand the true depths.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that people should stop romanticizing Russian violence, Russian winters, and realize that there is nothing mysterious about that. It's just like standing in a very dirty port where lots of people can actually mob you or hit you or spit on you. It's nothing romantic or cool in Russia. Trust me and trust Jonathan.
Yes, we've been there. We can attest to that. I know it's always a huge privilege and a pleasure having you on the channel. I know the audience sort of share that sentiment as well. We'll make sure to do these more frequently. I know we've had a bit of a gap with the election and various stuff going on, but yeah, welcome back soon. Thank you so much for coming back on the channel today.
Thank you.